making the trip down here this morning.
Glad to be here. I had to leave really early to get here, but glad to be here.
Well, and the students appreciate that. And so do I. Let's start at the beginning. You were born in Peru.
I was. I was born in Lima, Peru. Came here in 1979. I was 10 years old. Didn't speak a word of English. We came here. We moved here sort of for a better future. You know, to live that American dream. Single mom, 4 kids. She was a very smart, well, she still is. She had an MBA, but she had to start cleaning toilets at Marriott with 4 kids, and so she started, working at a hotel, working at National Data Corporation, doing data entry, because she didn't speak a word of English either, and she took English classes on top of that, and so my older sisters took care of us, and we've all been blessed, all done real well. She retired from the IRS, so she got on with Trust Company Bank, and then went to the IRS and retired from the IRS. But it's just been a good ride.
Yeah. What was it like to come to this country at that age and not speak English?
For me, it was sort of a very neat thing because everything was new. I didn't know American football, and so to learn how to play American football was great. Of course, when I played soccer, and soccer back then, not a whole lot of people played it, so I was just, doing dribbles all over the place. They didn't know what they were doing. So it was great. But to me, it was fun because I was a kid, everything was new. I learned English probably in about 7 months. So for me, it was really easy. For my mother, it was quite a different story, obviously, because we came from an environment where we had, live-in help. I'd never made a bed in my life before I got here. And then she came here to do something she'd never done in her life, to clean somebody else's toilets. And so for her, it was very, very difficult. But for me, to me, it was just something new friends, new sports, school, so it was great.
Well, you went to college at Emory.
I did.
Right, as your son is at college at Emory right now. And then obviously decided on law school. How did that come about? What led you to choose law as your path?
My organic chemistry professor basically told me that I was not going to go to medical school. So
how was that message conveyed?
By a very low grade. So I did a couple of plays when I was at Emory, and then I did it was like a model UN kind of thing. It was model OAS, and we had to play the role of diplomats, and so I was able to get up and speak and convince people to vote for my resolutions. I said, you know what, I kind of have a talent for this. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll go to law school. And so it wasn't an epiphany that I knew somebody that was a lawyer or I read To Kill a Mockingbird and I just want to right the injustices of the world. It was more of a, yeah, I could probably do that. And, but I went to law school, and probably unlike some of you, I actually loved law school. I really enjoyed it. To me, it was fun. I mean, I hated contracts and wills and, the rule against perpetuities. I still
Good timing.
Yeah, there you go, right? Can anybody say Pinoy v. Neff? But I really did enjoy law school.
Well, when you were in law school, did you have a vision for what your legal career would be about?
I had no clue. The only thing I knew is I wanted to be in the courtroom. That's just something I always loved. So when I was in law school, I did the Student Trial Lawyers Association, which is for the trial advocacy team. And that was, to me, the most fun because we got to travel and, play lawyer. And so that was great. So I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom. I didn't know exactly in what role. I was fortunate to be on law review. And so I had a lot of options. And so at first I thought, well, I'm going to work at big law because that's what you do. Because who wants to be a plaintiff's lawyer, right? And so because big law is where it is. You make all the big money and all that stuff. And so that's where I started my career, doing defense work. And then you get there and you realize it's not all, baseball games and nice dinner parties. It's billing 2,400 hours a week and,
Well, and we need to talk about that. I want to ask you just one other thing about law school. Looking back on it now, what did law school do to prepare you for your career, and what did it not do to prepare you? what was missing? Not that it could have been there, but what was missing and what would have prepared you?
Sure. Law school, I believe, prepares you to think like a lawyer. And back then, you sort of had a lot of theory, but not a whole lot of practical experience. That has changed throughout the years, and you guys are the beneficiaries of a lot of that sort of practical training that you get to, have what they say, ready-made lawyers, so that when you graduate from law school, you're ready to, take a deposition or do a hearing or perform a trial. For me, because I was so involved in the trial advocacy team, I got to be really good at evidence. So I knew the rules of evidence, and if you want to litigate, what I would say to you is do trial advocacy, because that really is a very good way to learn the rules of evidence in a way that you just know them. And to me, that was very helpful to have done that. Law review was great to learn how to blue book and all that stuff, but I found that that's the easier part of practice of law, because you can pick up a book and you can figure out the cases and figure out how to cite. But the practice of getting up in front of people, getting up in front of a judge, how you argue. I also did an externship at the Northern District Federal Court, so I got in front of judges when I was in third year, and I think that's all good practice to have, to get before, you can do clinical, whether it's Third Practice Act, at solicitor's offices or DA's office or a public defender's office. That's always good to do.
Right, but it was, you took the initiative to do the things
Sure.
in law school, otherwise it wouldn't have.
That's probably fair. That's probably fair.
Well, tell us about the transition into law practice. You went big law first.
Right.
Right. Tell us a little bit about what you did, right?
Sure.
What kind of work you did,
Sure.
and then I really like to ask most of our guests when you made that transition, what surprised you?
Sure. So I started my career in Greenville, South Carolina. My wife, I got married during law school, so I'm sure there might be some folks here who are couples. That might be your future. So I got married during my summer year of my second year. So my wife was given a job as a professor at Furman. She's much more intelligent than I'll ever be. So we moved to Greenville, South Carolina. And I got a job with a defense firm, and we did mostly products liability defense work. So we defended corporations and insurance companies and their insureds in products cases. So I started doing that, and all the billable hours and all the stuff that I've already talked about. And then I had actually this is probably a good thing to talk about. I had a very complicated case that I was given a lot of responsibility early on in my career. Because the partner for whom I was working, his wife developed cancer. And so he just sort of checked out, and I had to step in and do some of the depositions that a first, second year associate shouldn't be doing, but I was sort of forced to do them. And it was a product liability case. We had a really good liability defense. So back then, you could do what's called block billing. So you could say, spend 10 hours preparing for deposition of Dr. X, Dr. Y, Dr. Z, and so on and so forth. And so I did that during a 3-day period where I billed like 10 hours of prep time, and then for the next 2 days I had the depositions of all these different individuals, and I billed for each deposition. Fast forward about a month, we were able to strike the expert of the plaintiff and gutted their case, and so we resolved the case very favorably for our client. So I was coming around the office, and the secretary said, "Come here." And so she showed me the pre-bill, and the pre-bill is, the billing sheet that the partners got, and then they usually will write it down because we're spending too much time on a research project or something. But this partner had taken my bill, put an X on it, turned it over, and rewrote my bill. And my 10 hours of prep time turned into 4 hours for this individual, 3 hours for this individual, 5 hours for this individual. So my 10 hours turned into like 20 hours. And I was, what do? You're a young associate. I'd built 2,400 hours that first year, which is a lot of hours. But what do? That's one of those gut check moments. I turned in my pre-bill. I did what I was supposed to do. I billed my time honestly. And here's this partner of this firm who has rewritten my bill. What do? It's not,
What did you do?
So I went into her office after much, going back and forth. I said, I can't do this. So I went to her office. I said, Judy, I don't know what this is, but I billed my time honestly. I billed $2,400 last year. I'm on track to do the same this year, if not more. I just want you to know that I don't think this is right. And so she says to me, well, I would expect a lawyer at this firm to be adequately preparing for these very important depositions where our client was facing a $10 million potential judgment. I said, well, Judy, wait. If you got a problem with my work product, I want to learn. I want to be the best that I can be. Read the depositions. If I have not done something that I should have done, then I want to know. But don't sit here and tell me that I didn't prepare when you haven't even seen my work product. Because my work product, frankly, got the expert excluded, which made us settle the case for nothing, which in her mind, that's why the client wasn't going to argue about the bill that I sent, right? So in her mind, you could just pad the bills and nobody was going to know. And of course, they are the beneficiaries because they're the partners, right? And then I went to the managing partner after that. I said, look, this happened. I just think you need to know. I didn't last very long after that at the firm. It's probably the best thing that could have happened to me. And for those of you that go into defense or hourly type, you're going to be faced with those decisions. Whether or not you should pad your bills, double bill. And a lot of people do it, and a lot of people still do it. But you have to be true to yourself. And what's the right thing to do? I'm glad I made that decision early on, because if you start down that path, I think it's much more difficult to come back.
And I think in those moments it's natural, for some people anyway, to hear a voice in their head that says no one will ever know.
And nobody would have ever known. And I didn't do it, so it's not like it didn't. I could have just as easy not have known about that. I could have said, you know what, I wasn't supposed to see that anyway. That's to them, I'm not the one that's going to get in trouble because I did my billing properly.
Do you think the short tenure you had there was in part due to the fact that you spoke up?
Yes. Well, I know it was. I would go up, I would see this person every morning, and she'd look at me, and it got to the point where I just got to be syrupy sweet just to see how long she could keep up just being a total, just evil person. She got disbarred, by the way, I heard about 10 years later, for doing this same kind of thing. Somebody turned her into the bar. But it was just very difficult. And, I would wake up, knots in my stomach. It's hard enough being a young associate than to have that kind of stress. And so I said, you know what, I'm out. So I left and I started my own firm. And oddly enough, I made twice as much money as I did as a first-year associate my first year out.
It must have been an incredibly frustrating experience because you didn't do anything wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And yet you suffered personally.
Sure.
As a result of it.
But I always say, life is not always fair, right? But it's how you deal with that adversity that defines who you are as a person. People always ask me, do you think you've been discriminated because you're Latino? I'm from Peru originally. I said, I don't know, maybe. But if somebody chooses not to give me a job because I'm Latino and I look different or my name is weird, that's their loss. Because I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the best that I can be. And if you fail to see that in me, well, that's your problem. So I've never been one to say, oh, woe is me, I can't get a job because of this or that. I think if you spend too much energy on the I can'ts, you don't have enough time to really do the I can'ts, which is, I'm a half full glass kind of guy.
I can tell. Let me ask you one more thing about your time at the firm in Greenville. You said you billed 2,400 hours that first year.
Yes.
The students are going to be doing a little exercise in a couple of weeks to try to help them understand what that really means, what that is like. Can you describe what that pace really is if you're billing honestly?
Yeah, that's 90 hours a week easily. You're working the weekends, and every day till 8 or 9. It's hard. It really is. But when you have a lot of work, it goes by fast, and you get involved. And I was involved in a lot of big cases, so it was kind of fun, frankly. It's enjoyable work, but you know, I was young, recently married, so I didn't have children or anything like that. So work-life balance wasn't there at the time, but it wasn't as necessary. You know, obviously when you have children, that's a much, much tougher. And I'll tell you that I see a lot of lawyers that work that pace late in their careers really don't have that work-life balance, in my humble estimation, right, and they miss out. I was presiding over a case early in my career, and the plaintiff's lawyer wanted a continuance because his son was playing his first football game, and it was like Wednesday afternoon. It was going to be a week-long medical malpractice trial. And he said, Judge, you know, my son's playing his first football game for his high school. I really would like to be there. If we could break at 4, that would be really nice. I looked at a partner at a big firm here, or in Atlanta. Some of you probably have interviewed at that firm. One of the best lawyers in Georgia. And he said, Judge, you know, I've had a lot of success in my career. The only thing I regret is not going to the football games for my kids. And if you break at 4 today, I promise you that we'll get this case done by Friday. I said, great. What a professional thing to do. And it's Tommy Carlock, by the way, Carlock Copeland. Just a great guy, great lawyer. And we got the case done. He got a defense verdict, and, you know, it was all good. But, you know, I think a lot of people that I see now, you know, sort of my age group and older, you hear those stories a lot. So just that work-life balance is important. You know, what you do is important. Being a lawyer is important. It's a blessing, and it's a calling, and it's a great profession. But, you know, don't put your families aside. Don't put your other life aside, because that's equally as important. And you're seeing a lot of stuff, high incidence of alcoholism and drug abuse in lawyers and mental illness, and so we're being much more proactive about that from the bar's perspective as well.
That's changing very.
Yeah, that's changing a lot.
I want to turn in just a minute to your appointment to the bench and your time as state court judge. Can you talk just a little bit about the time between leaving the big firm and going on the bench? You started your own.
Sure.
Practice. Talk a little bit about that and what you really liked about that phase of your career.
That was great because I started in Greenville, and I was the only lawyer in the upstate of South Carolina that spoke Spanish. Right, so that was a huge benefit to me because I had a big community that I could, you know, market to that I didn't really have competition. So that's why I was able to be successful very quickly. You know, so I was able to get a niche to fill that need. So I did that for a couple of years in Greenville, and I was doing, you know. I wouldn't do criminal law or family law, and I got in with 2 other lawyers that did the other stuff that I didn't do, and I would refer them the criminal case came in. I said, look, I don't do that, but, you know, we weren't really partners. We sort of eat what you kill kind of thing, but I would give them the cases, and then I would help with the translation, and then we would split the fee. And then I would do, you know, mostly plaintiff's work because I'd done it on the defense side, so now I was doing it on the plaintiff side. And so I started doing that, and then Michael was born, and so my wife decided that she didn't want to work anymore because they were requiring to travel abroad and do semesters in Spain and so on, and we didn't want to do that. So we moved back to Atlanta. I had interviewed with Bondurant, which was it's still around.
Emmett was here just last week.
Oh, really? Okay, great firm, great lawyers. I'd interviewed with them when I was in law school. And the guy that I'd interviewed with, Keenan Nix, you know, he wrote in the card, called me and put his home number. And I said, I got the job. And back in the day, you know, Bondurant was the place to go. I mean, they paid more than King and Spalding, more than Austin and Bird. They may still do that, I don't know. But it was like the premier. And so I was surprised I didn't get an interview on campus. And so he said, call me. So I said, I got this in the bag. This is great. So I called him up, and he said, Tony, you know, I've interviewed at Harvard, at Yale, at Vandy, at Virginia, at Duke, at all these places. And I just want to tell you, you're the best candidate I've seen the entire hiring season. I was like, awesome. He goes, but we're not going to give you a job. I was like, what? He said, look, you're not number one in your class at Georgia State. I went to Georgia State Law School. He said, you're not number one person in the class, and we're just not going to give you an offer. That, I think, has changed. But I want you to know that I want to practice with people just like you. And I'm not going to be here forever because I'm going to eventually start my own practice. And I want to practice with you. This is when I was a second year law student. I was like, thank you. You know, it's like, I want a job, you know. But I did split that summer with 2 good firms. And I always thought I would be a defense lawyer. I mean, you know, I never, because, you know, when you're in law school, and maybe this happens now, you know, if you do well and if you're on law review, you know, it seems like the same number of people are the ones that get all the on-campus interviews. I don't know if it's the same way now. And it's, you almost felt bad because, you know, there are a lot of very, very talented people that were not getting interviews just by virtue of, you know, what's written on a sheet. And that's horribly unfair, I believe. Because there's a lot of talent there that is going untapped. But that's neither here nor there. They have to have a way, I guess, to differentiate. But when you were in that boat, you sort of assumed that's what you do. And you wouldn't even consider doing something else, right? The only reason I did is because I had that situation with this partner where I may be still in defense work in Greenville. Who knows? I'm glad, though, it happened because it sort of changed my mindset a little bit. I got to be a little more entrepreneurial, started my own firm, and then so going back to what happened after Greenville, we moved to Atlanta. Keenan said, hey, I'm leaving, are you ready? And my wife had just decided to quit. And I was like, well, maybe. And so I started with Keenan, and we had a lot of success early on when I came back to Atlanta. And I thought I had made enough money to be appointed. And, you know, so we had a plaintiff's practice, and we had several huge verdicts. And, you know, then I was asked, you know, Denise Majette, who was a congresswoman, who was a state court judge in DelCampo, had decided to run for Congress, and she won. She beat Cynthia McKinney. And so I was asked, would you be interested in going on the bench? And I was really young. I was 32, 33. So I was probably one of the youngest judges in the history of the state of Georgia when I was appointed. In hindsight, that was probably too young. Probably, you know, but everything worked out, right? So, I'd done well and saved enough for college, I thought, for colleges and private schools and all that stuff. And so I was appointed by Governor Barnes to go on bench.
Well, you served a number of years.
I did.
Talk about that experience. What did you like about being a judge, and what did you not like about it?
That's the best job ever. Love being a trial judge. You know, unfortunately, we don't pay our public servants nearly enough, and that's the only reason I'm not a state court judge. Because I really love that job. I love every part of my job because I love the courtroom. I love the drama. I love good lawyers arguing good motions, trying well-tried cases, and it's just that's just fun. There were parts of it that were not as fun, like when we had, you know, criminal arraignment, when you have, you know, 140 individuals coming in, and the way the jurisdiction works in Metro Atlanta primarily, you have a state court and superior court, both trial level courts. And in Metro and in DelCampo, where I served, we saw all the great civil cases, all the medical malpractice, trucking, business cases, products liability, all that stuff, and the misdemeanor criminal cases. So you saw all the DUIs, shoplifting, simple assault, enough criminal to have fun Fourth Amendment stuff, but you didn't really have to put anybody away for life or anything like that, right? So the life sentence or the death penalty in misdemeanors a year. That's the most I can put somebody in jail. You know, they're passing that out like candy in Superior Court, right? So it was great because you got some criminal, but I really like civil more than anything, and we didn't have to do domestic stuff, which is you know, if I had to decide who's going to get the washer and who's going to get the dryer, just shoot me now. I would not want to do that.
You said a big part of the fun was seeing great lawyers, and many of these students will intern for judges during their time in law school. They're going to see some great lawyers. But they come back to me and they said they also see some lawyers who are not so good.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Talk a little bit about that and how you dealt with cases that were not being handled the way you would have handled.
That was actually one of the big surprises to me, because I thought everybody practiced pretty much like I did. And when I went on the bench, I realized, you know, I'm a really good lawyer. I mean, and I don't say that in a sort of obnoxiously arrogant way, but there's just a lot of really bad people out there that just do not know what they're doing. And, you know, you might ask a question of a litigant, like, you know, Mr. Smith, are you sure you want to do that? And if a judge asks you that, he's probably trying to tell you something. You know, it's like, yeah, judge, it's like, okay, are you sure? You know, you didn't really put any evidence of, you know, the lost wages. I think you might want to put a document in. No, we're good, judge. Yeah, so unfortunately, you do see a lot of that. And, you know, that's why I always counsel young lawyers to partner with lawyers that have been practicing for a while. You know, if you get a big case, you're going to get more cases. Associate somebody in that area of law so that you can learn from. I mean, even when, you know, I moved back to Atlanta, and I've had 3 or 4 years of practice under my belt, and I felt like, you know, like I knew what I was doing. For example, I had a tread separation case, a tire case, and, you know, I had done products on the defense side, but I've never really done a tire case on the plaintiff side. So I associated Jim Butler, right, in his firm, because we had a good relationship with them. And so we tried the case, we didn't go to trial, they ended up paying us a lot of money. But you know, I was able to learn from them, their discovery, how they did things, how they set things up. And so even though I had to split my fee that first time, the education that I got was invaluable. I think sometimes young lawyers just want to go at it because they think they can do. They think they got big dollar signs in their minds, and you know, it takes a lot of work to get from here to there. You know, sometimes people think, oh, well, you know, so it's just getting, you know, all these multi-million-dollar awards. Well, you know, it's a lot of work that goes into getting them, preparing the case, and getting the documents and the information that you need to be able to maximize the recovery for your client. So that's a good thing to do.
Well, I know one of the things that you have been interested in and very active in is issues of professionalism, which is how we got to know you. As a judge, did you see conduct that you would consider unprofessional? And if so, what was it and what did you do about it as a judge?
Yes. I had conduct that was very professional, like the example I gave about Tommy Carlott. I had one lawyer early in my career as a judge, this guy is a named partner at a big firm who will remain nameless, but you would at least recognize the name of the firm if I said it. Trying a medical malpractice trial. And again, I was always really good at evidence. I've always been very good at evidence. End of the second or third day of trial, plaintiff has their expert on the stand, and he gets up and says, Judge, for the past 30 years, the law in the state of Georgia has been X. And I was like, that just doesn't sound right. You know, but here's this guy who's a named partner in this big firm, who's big wig. I said, tell you what, I told the plaintiff's lawyer not to go into that aspect of testimony. I said, I'm going to take it under advisement, you know, do a little research, and then in the morning, I'll give you my ruling, because we were not going to finish that expert that day. It was at the end of the day. So I stayed in my office with my staff attorney. We stayed there until 8 or 9. And we weren't finding anything in what I thought the law was in fact what the law appeared to be. So the next morning I bring him into my office and I said, Mr. So-and-so, you indicated that for the past 30 years the law in the state of Georgia was X. And I told you yesterday that I thought it was Y, but out of deference to you, I was going to, take it under advisement. And I stayed here till 7 o'clock. I missed dinner with my family. My staff attorney stayed with me. And what we found was, why? Do you have anything to, illuminate why you think X is the law? Oh, no, Judge, I don't have anything. Excuse me? I said, okay. I know never to trust that lawyer again. But not only that. So the following week we had a judges meeting. We had judges meetings twice a year where all the judges get together. I was so mad at this guy. I told every judge what he did. And everybody was incensed that he would do something like that and take advantage, because I was a young judge. Fast forward 4 years later, I'm coming off the bench. Judge Janice Gordon is going on the bench, right? And so there's a secure hallway that separates our two courtrooms. And so I'm coming off the bench, she's coming on. She looks at me, she says, Tony, come here, come here. So, remember that story you told me about such and such lawyer several years ago? Yeah? Well, he just tried that with me. And I knew he was full of, you know what. So I denied his motion. So the point is, judges, remember, if you think you're going to get away with something in one case, it's not worth it. Just do the right thing. And, you have to give the judge the correct law. And if you don't, that's actually, you can be disbarred for that. I mean, nobody believes that or thinks about that, but you have to even give contradicting law. If there's a case that's against you, even if the other side hasn't cited it, your duty is, and you know about it, is to tell the court. Only one lawyer ever did that in oral argument. Charles Mathis, may he rest in peace. Excellent trial lawyer. And he said, Judge, yesterday the Court of Appeals came out with an opinion that might seem to go against my position, but let me tell you why it's distinguishable. The other lawyer didn't even know that case existed. And I said, that's impressive. I know I can trust that lawyer. Right? So your reputation is your stock in trade. And what you do in any one case will be remembered. So, those are just some of the things about professionalism, I think, in the courtroom. And, the other thing, as I was telling you earlier, some of you are going to take advantage of the Third Practice Act in a couple of years. And that's when you get to work for a DA's office or a solicitor's office or a public defender's office, and you actually will get to practice in court. Well, I had this Emory Law student that was working for the DeKalb County PD's office. And so it was the end of the year, so he was about to graduate, so he wanted to continue his case to the following semester so that the next crop of students would take over that case. And I generally did not do that. I did not like to get continuances. I ran a very, very efficient courtroom. So my staff knew not to ever give continuances like that. So this guy walks up. I wasn't on the bench, so he walks up to my criminal calendar clerk and says, what are the trial dates in October? And she said, why? She said, well, I need a continuance to October. I said, I don't think the judge is going to give you a continuance to October. She goes, I don't care what you think. I asked you, when are the court dates for October? So she said, okay, it's the week of October 14th. So then he goes, Judge, our semester's ending, we need to, so I would never routinely do that. But I asked the solicitor, and they were okay with it. The PD's okay with it. Okay, we'll continue it till October. So I went back into chambers, and my criminal staff, my criminal person, said, that kid was such a jerk. I said, what do you mean? Well, the kid that asked you for continuance, yeah. Well, then she told me what he said. I said, he did what? So the next day, we had an arraignment calendar, and that's my calendar when I have 140 people come in. It's crazy. There are lawyers everywhere. So he was coming back for arraignment. So before, the very first thing I did that morning, I called him up. I said, call him Mr. Jones. Come on up. Remember you came yesterday? Yes, sir. Remember I told you, I gave you continuance, but I wouldn't normally do that? He said, well, yes, sir. I'm thankful for that. So, well, my staff just told me that this is what you told her now. And of course he started shaking. I said, and of course inside I'm really, laughing, but I was putting my best stern look. I said, son, let me tell you something. Real lawyers don't talk to my staff that way. I don't talk to my staff that way. And no snot-nosed kid from Emory Law School is going to come here and talk to my staff that way. Are we clear? He's like, yes. He sent her a bouquet of flowers, chocolates the next day. And I did that really to teach him a lesson because, and that's a, you guys, for those of you that are going to litigate, the judge's staff is more important than the judge. Oftentimes, they are the ones that are setting the dates, they're doing the calendars. They can make or break you. So, be nice to the staff. Be nice anyway. I mean, you know, being a lawyer doesn't give you a license to be a jerk. And unfortunately, we have too much of that. You think that just because you have a law degree, you know, you're God's gift to the law. No, you're just another dude that just happens to have a JD. So, anyway, be nice.
No, but yeah, it's a good lesson. You loved being a judge.
Yes.
And yet you left. Let's talk about that decision to leave the bench
Sure.
and go back into practice, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now.
Sure. Well, it was a very tough decision because I loved being a judge. As a matter of fact, I was that close to being appointed to the federal district court until one of our senators. Well, anyway, we're taking this, so that I will not go into that. But you know, everything happens for a reason. Unfortunately, you know, we had that market downturn in 06, lost a lot of money in investments, still paying private school tuitions, and had
It's Michael's fault.
It's all Michael's fault. Yes, it is. It's all his fault. No, you know, I had to make a decision. Do I pull my kids out of the only school they ever known, you know, and stay in the job that I love, or do I go back into private practice and make some money? And so I left. And it's been great. It's been phenomenally, you know, very, very good to me in financial terms. And I love the practice of law. It's not that I hate it. I like being a judge a lot more, just from the job perspective. But, you know, there are rewards in the practice of law, and, you know, and I've been blessed. But it was a difficult decision. And I was offered a job with one of your alums, you know, Jeff Harris, Harris Penn, well, it was then Harris Penn Larry, and then Harris Penn Larry DelCampo. We did a lot of sort of high-end personal injury stuff. But that was the only reason I left. You know, it wasn't, you know, at the time there were some other judges that I left for some improprieties, and I had to remind people, I did not leave for any improprieties. You know, it was only financial for me.
You've spent a lot of time with Bar Association.
Yes.
With the Georgia Bar, with the Commission on Professionalism, with the Hispanic Bar Association, both in Georgia and nationally.
Yes.
Nobody paid you to do that.
No.
Why?
They still don't. And I'm the executive committee, so it's even worse.
And nobody's going to pay you for that.
Yeah,
So, why is it important for lawyers to get involved in it?
I'm a strong believer that much is expected of those to whom much is given. I've been blessed throughout my professional career, just in many ways. And so I think it's important to give back to the profession that has given me so much. And I enjoy it. And it's also a good thing to do professionally. I mean, when I was the president of the Georgia Hispanic Bar Association, you know, we didn't have that many members, but every judge wanted to come to our events. So I knew every single Supreme Court justice, you know, and I was on their committees, and I was a really young lawyer. I was like 28, 29, right? And so they were calling me to help them. I was like, who am I? I'm just a young lawyer. So it's a great thing to do from a practical, you know, business development, you know, networking. I mean, getting involved in local bar associations and specialty bar associations is a phenomenal way of getting involved and just enhancing your practice. You're going to meet people that then you can run things by. You know, they're going to help your career. Because all of you here, you know, you're going to be each other's colleagues at one point. You're going to call on each other if you have a case that maybe somebody does criminal law, you don't do it, or personal injury law or corporate law or tax law, because, you know, those who try to do everything don't do anything really well, in my humble estimation. If you see a lawyer that's telling you he can do your corporate stuff, your workers' comp stuff, your immigration stuff, you know, it's like they're not doing anything in my view. I don't think you can do it. It's just too difficult. So it's great to do that from that perspective. But it's also great, just as I said, just to give back, you know, to make our profession what it can be. You know, not what people, you know, there's so many lawyer jokes out there, right? But lawyers really do good work, and they do good work for our communities. They do a lot of pro bono work, you know, work that when people, you know, everybody hates lawyers until they meet one. And so, you know, if you're involved in the profession, I think, you know, in professionalism, you know, you and I served on the commission for a number of years, and I make it a practice to take out to lunch my adversary as soon as I get in the case. I just take him to lunch. I find that it's a lot harder to be a jerk to somebody you've broken bread with, because these days, as you guys know, I mean, you know, people don't pick up the phone anymore. They just fire off an email. You know, nobody talks, nobody sits face to face. So there's no relationship. And it's a lot easier, one, to be a jerk when you don't know the person and you don't have to see the person or have to talk to the person. But also, you don't necessarily know, or I don't think you can always gauge the intent with which an email is sent. You might be reading it in a way that was not intended. So in my practice, I take opposing counsel out just to get to know them. Not to talk about the case, but just, hey, what do you do? You know, you have any kids, family? I had 2 lunches this week with opposing counsels, and we may disagree on the merits of our cases, on the legal positions of our cases, but, you know, we're friendly, and so we can say, look, and so at the end of the lunch, say, look, just tell me what you need, and we'll just get the case moving, you know, no sense to file motions and all this other stuff. So it makes a practice a lot more bearable, you know, so when you know somebody, and most lawyers are good people. Lawyers are fun people, you know, when you go to these bar meetings, they're great, you know, lawyers are fun. I'd rather be with a group of lawyers than with a group of accountants. You know, no offense to any accountants in the room. We tend to be fun people.
I'm about to turn this over to the students, and I have a long list of questions, as you know. But before I do that, is there anything else, any advice that you would have for them, maybe something that you wish somebody had said to you when you were a first year law student? Anything you haven't had a chance to say yet? This is an open shop.
You know, what I would say is don't pigeonhole yourself to any area of law or anything that you might want to practice, because the wonderful thing about the law is you can be in front of a jury, in front of the judges. You can be an appellate lawyer, you can be a corporate lawyer, you can be a transaction lawyer, you can be an immigration lawyer. There's so many things you can do. You know, take those elective classes that might be sort of outside of your comfort zone, because, you know, you might really learn something that you enjoy. That, you know, for me, I always sort of knew, but so many of my friends really didn't have a clue what they wanted to do. And they thought, well, I'm going to be a corporate lawyer because my dad's in business, and, you know, this is what I'm going to do. And so that's what they were going to do. So just don't be afraid to branch out. I think that's a good thing to do, just because you'll learn as well.
You see what questions the students have for you this morning. What do you have for Judge DelCampo? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Judge. Dalen Smith, thank you for coming, speaking with us this morning. Could you tell us, how did your post-judge career, how did you being a judge help in any way at all in your post-judge career?
Well, it doesn't hurt when you know the judge. My first trial after leaving the bench was a case against Ford Motor Company. It was in Cobb County with Judge Tanksy, who was a good friend because we had these judges meet. So she kept calling me judge.
You earned the title, too.
Yeah. So, but when we were sitting there, you know, got opposing counsel, you know, from out of state, national counsel for Ford. You know, he's getting frustrated. She keeps calling me judge, not in front of the jury. Just she's calling me Judge DelCampo, Judge DelCampo, Judge DelCampo. And so he gets up and says, Judge, I know you know Judge DelCampo. So she had him calling me judge, which was great. You know, but we would appreciate it if you didn't refer to him as judge, you know, in front of the jury. You know, like, I have no objection to that, Your Honor. But it's one of the benefit is you're not the sort of the aura of being in the courtroom is demystified. Some people think that when you're in a courtroom, oh my God, the judge is an all-knowing. No, they're just people just like they have the power to decide for sure, but they're not any different than you are, right? So people, they get all nervous when they get in front of a judge. And so I know a lot of those buffoons, right? And I say that lovingly. But, they're not all the most intelligent. Most of them want to get it right, right? And so, to me, I have a comfort level in the courtroom that I didn't have before. As much as I have much more than I had before. So that's been a huge benefit, and you just get a lot of, it's, lawyers don't try to yank your chain as much when you've been a judge. They can't try to pull over. Like, if folks try to get with discovery, you will eventually find that this litigate. Folks, that's the bane of my existence, discovery. And discovery disputes, and when people hide documents and don't do stuff and lie, and that unfortunately happens too much. But I don't get as much of that as I did when I was young, and I think having been a judge has really helped on that end as well.
Good questions.
Somebody over here?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So you said something. I don't know why I stood. So you stood or
Motion
said,
granted.
Sure. But you said something really important to you was finding that work-life balance. What are some warning signs we should be on the lookout for in the event that balance is out of whack?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that's a very personal decision, right? But if you have children and you're not going to their, and you're not always going to be able to go to everything, right? That's not necessarily realistic either. But it's a balance. And if your stomach's in knots every morning when you get up, if you feel like you're not spending enough time with your wife or your husband or your significant other, listen to that. Listen to that voice inside of you that says, you know what, this is taking way too much of me, because it's not worth it. Obviously, if folks feel like they have to drink or whatever just to do the stress, that's a red flag. And unfortunately, our professions probably have the highest incidence of alcoholism than any other profession, or one of the highest, if not the highest. So, but strive to maintain that work-life balance, because at the end of the day, we work to live, not live to work.
Good questions you have for the judge? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Judge. Can you talk about some of your experience handling some of the civil litigation around the Brian Nichols case?
Oh yeah, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Brian Nichols case.
They probably are not.
Okay, so this was an individual that shot a judge on the bench, and then shot the court reporter, killed the judge, killed the court reporter, killed a deputy, escaped, and then killed an INS agent who was working in his home. The guy was brilliant in his evil. He was on trial for rape. And he, what happened is he knew they only put one deputy on him. Technically, they were supposed to have two deputies on him, but they only had one deputy on him. This, poor lady was 5'2", out of shape deputy. So when they were in the holding cell, he was getting dressed out for trial. He just cold cocked her, knocked her out, locked her in the jail cell, took the key. He saw where she kept the gun. So she had the key, he had the key, got her gun out. He had the key to allow him into the secure areas of the courthouse. So he goes in the secure, he's wearing a suit now, mind you, okay? He's got a gun, and he's got the keys to the secure areas of the courthouse. He goes into the judge's chambers behind the courtroom, and there's a deputy there, so he ties him up. The deputy faints a heart attack, and he's pulling the panic button, there's nobody in the room where they have all the cameras in the control room. There's nobody there. One guy had called in sick. The other guy went to get donuts for his boss. Nobody was manning the control center. And so nobody answers the call. So he ties up the 2 secretaries that were there, and so he says, where's the judge? And they go, he's on the bench. So he goes from behind, the judge enters, so he comes from behind him, shoots him and kills him. Court reporter looks up, shoots her, and then goes back in the secure hallway. Everybody in the courtroom, pandemonium, everybody's leaving the courtroom. This guy just shot the judge. So he goes down in the secure stairwell to leave. There's a deputy coming up, shoots him dead. He gets out. This is in Fulton County, so it's around underground. He goes into the underground parking deck. This guy was getting out of his car. There's a reporter from the AJC. He doesn't kill him, but he pistol whips him. And he takes his car. Well, it's a green Honda Accord. He takes his car and he drives it 2 stories up and parks it. Gets out, walks to 5 Point Station in Marta. By now, the whole city is looking for a green Honda Accord because that's where this individual was supposed to be. But no, he was in Marta. So he gets out of the Lennox Station, carjacks another vehicle, gets to the house where this INS agent was working in his house, kills him, takes his truck, and ends up in, what is this woman's name? There was a woman, it made national news, as you can imagine, but she sort of convinced him to turn himself in. And they spent the night together before that, and it was just an odd story, right? That she says she had read The Purpose-Driven Life to him, and she cooked him pancakes in the morning, and then he agreed to turn himself in. But they didn't know each other before that. So they filed a lawsuit against the judge's family, the court reporter's family, the deputy's family, and the INS agent. They all filed a lawsuit against the deputies and the county for lack of security in the courthouse. So I didn't handle the criminal case. That was handled in Fulton County, and he was actually not given the death penalty, which is crazy to me. If you're going to have a death penalty, that's the case to give it. But they filed a civil case in DeKalb County where I presided. So I presided over all of those cases. And it was interesting because and you guys will learn this, but every party stood in a different place than each other. For example, the deputies were employees of the county. So there's what's called a workers' comp bar. So because they were working for the county, they couldn't sue the county. Their only recourse was the workers' comp law. But the judge was a state employee, so he could. Then the INS agent, it happened so far away, when is it reasonable to assume or think that this guy would do that? So is that reasonable, foreseeable that some guy way outside of the courthouse? And so everybody was different. So it's a very, very interesting case.
Yeah, hard to remember what notoriety that whole thing had. And that was it was a real tragedy. What questions do you have for the judge? Mr. Secretary.
So oddly enough, that happened in the building. I'm a title abstractor at Fulton and DeKalb County. That was a crazy day.
Yeah,
But
you were there?
Yeah, I work in the record room.
I
I'm
got you.
38 years old.
Okay. You're so young.
So yeah, well, I mean, just to tell you why I was there, like, the woman who he went to in Gwinnett, her husband was actually a murder victim in Columbia County, Georgia, from a fight. So there was a bunch of weird stuff going on there, but weird segue. So are there any cases that you regret, the way that it came out, like before you, like, especially like something like ineffectiveness of counsel?
Not in the exact same way, but I'll tell you, I would sit in for Superior Court every now and again just to do some felony work, just for kicks. I was presiding over an armed robbery case. And the case was really interesting. So there was this woman who had a drug problem. And this guy who ended up being the victim, who was just a just a pathetic individual, was taking advantage of her and was giving her drugs in exchange for sexual favors. And so he said, I'll give you drugs if you come to my motel room. So she goes to her motel room. Unbeknownst to her, her boyfriend's following her. So he gets a screwdriver to try to jimmy the door to get in, to get her out of there. So he knocks on the room where they realize somebody's trying to get in. They open the door. He barges in. He's got a screwdriver. So they start, having words. They start tussling a little bit. And so the boyfriend holds the guy down, tells the girlfriend, just get money from his wallet and let's go. Get some money, they leave. So of course they get caught, and they both get charged with armed robbery. Okay, technically it's an armed robbery. They robbed a guy and he had a weapon because it was a screwdriver. But he wasn't pointing at him, he wasn't threatening with it or anything like that. He was just wrestling with them. But technically it's an armed robbery. So the case went to trial. He was offered 10 to serve 5. 5 years in prison for that. It's like, So they took it to trial. So the public defender had the case. So, the jury gets it, and they're like, well, they did steal the money, and he did have a screwdriver. Technically, it meets the definition of an armed robbery. And so they convicted him. It's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I wanted to put the victim in jail, right? And so, but it's a 10-year minimum sentence. I don't have a choice. I had to give this 24-year-old kid 10 years in prison for that, which I thought was just manifestly unjust. Until the prosecutor stands up and the public defender starts, tearing up. And I'm like, what's going on? Okay, I'm going to give him the minimum, First certified conviction. Second certified conviction. Mandatory life. I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut. I had to sentence a 24-year-old to life in prison. Life! For that. That was a sobering moment. And one that, I still remember, I was like, this just can't be. And back then, I think now there's more leeway, you have more discretion, but back then you really didn't.
You didn't have a choice.
You didn't have any choice. And I had to take a break because I couldn't formulate the words to say I am sentencing to your for your natural life in prison. And they were drug offenses. They weren't violent offenses what you had before. And so that's one of those cases that you say that was just a miscarriage of justice. I did what I was ethically obligated to do, but it was not easy. And unfortunately, I was upheld. They appealed it, but I didn't make any bad rulings. And so, so that was the one case that I felt really was just an injustice, and I didn't have any choice.
Judge, we're out of time. Do you have time to hang around for a few minutes, shake
Yeah,
hands?
he's going to go to a class, so I'm going to be here for a while.
Oh, join me in thanking Judge Cody.